Oh my God, this video is gonna be so fucking long. Does anyone even care? I'm giving you so much information here, but does anyone even care? Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Hormone Diaries. Strap yourselves in because this is the video. This is the one. I have been using a whole bunch of different menstrual and fertility tracking apps, and today I'm going to share with you my results. My thoughts on them. So let's start with the who, what, where, when. I first started taking my temperature every morning and putting it into the app that I was currently using, Clue. And basically this is kind of like how you can track your fertility because your temperature is supposed to rise after ovulation, so then you kind of know roughly when you ovulated. And then it was in February that I decided that I wanted to make this video. So I did a bit of research, I downloaded a few more apps, and I kind of like backlogged those 2 months of temperature data. Yes, my Saturday and Sunday mornings, very fun. But now I have been consistently using 5 different apps for 3 months. And I've been using the paper method for about 2 months because I got introduced to that partway through this journey. And I'll tell you now, I am very excited that the moment I finish filming this video, I will be deleting those surplus apps from my phone so I no longer have to input my temperature 6 times every morning. The effort. Why? Why did I do this to myself? Anyway, let's meet the apps. First up, we have Clue. I was using the free version of this, but they do have like a Clue Plus membership option, and Clue is a menstrual tracking app. Next up, we have Kindara. Kindara is £4.49 per month, and they are a specific fertility tracking app. Natural Cycles. This is £6.99 per month or $49.99 per year, and they have different versions of the app. So there's the birth control version. I was using the plan pregnancy version, and they also have a follow pregnancy version. A lot of these apps also have pregnancy versions. I think Clue now have one in their Plus subscription, and pretty sure Kindara also has a pregnancy version. Anyway, Ovia is free. They are a fertility tracking app, and they also have a bunch of other options and pregnancy versions too. Read Your Body, which is £1.79 per month or $12.99 per year. And they are a menstrual cycle charting app. And then there's the paper fertility awareness method, which is free, but I guess you do need paper, a printer, ink, and pencils. You can create your own. I'm sure there's like tons of free downloads on the internet, or you could probably pay someone who is a fertility awareness method like practitioner and download their resources. So a few disclosures before we begin of my affiliations with some of these apps, because transparency is important. So Clue is actually the app that I have been using myself for the last 5 or 6 years. So that is the app that I know the best and have been using, and it has like all of my past data in it. But also about 6 years ago, I went on this trip called the Berlin Affair that Clue hosted. So I have been on like a free press trip with Clue and visited their offices. It was a great time. And also I have done a previous sponsored video with Natural Cycles, and that is who I got my thermometer from. So because I was doing that sponsored video with them, they gave me a thermometer, which you do have to pay for, or you can just like buy any like digital thermometer as long as it goes to like 2 decimal points. That's all you need, and it can go in your mouth. But because I already had that thermometer, that was the one that I was using for all of my tracking. But this video is not sponsored, no affiliations with any of these companies for this video, and so I can say whatever I like. And although I said I've been using all 5 of these apps for 3 months, because my cycle is super long and irregular, that's only 2 cycles. So I've actually only been using them for 2 cycles, but you know, it's been a long time. It's time to show you my results, and also I would really like to delete some of these apps from my phone now, please, thank you. But before we begin, let's learn a bit about the fertility awareness method. So like I said, I started using the paper method partway through this little experiment, and that's because one of my lovely viewers, Naomi Gale, who is a FAM, fertility awareness method practitioner, got in touch with me and was like, let me show you the ropes. Let me teach you what's going on. And so this is that call. How many different methods of like fertility awareness are there? Is it just one, like, or is there different versions of it?
There are different versions of it. I'd say the big two are the symptothermal method,
Mm-hmm.
which includes your temperature, your discharge, and checking your cervix if it's something that you want to check. And of course, using the calendar method. So then obviously knowing roughly where you are in your cycle. So
Right.
there's the symptothermal method. Then you've got the Billings method, where they focus only on your cervical mucus, your cervical discharge.
Oh.
So they don't utilize the temperature at all. They think it's an added hassle, I suppose, if you like. And they don't necessarily believe in touching the cervix either. The thing is, with the Billings method, it's a long process to get your head around, because if you've never tuned in with your cervical discharge before, and then you're expecting to try and avoid a pregnancy, it can be quite a difficult process and something to navigate, so that's why some people are kind of put off the Billings method. But there are studies on it, and the Billings method is just as reliable as any other method when utilised properly. So just relying on the cervical mucus.
That's so interesting that what comes out of your vagina can tell you so much.
It's amazing.
Okay, I'm really intrigued. One, to like get into this chart that I have in front of me, but then also like, I guess talking more about cervical discharge, because a lot of the apps, like some of them just tell you, like just ask you to put in what kind. Others have like what kind and what amount, and I'd never seen that before. And I'm like, what should I be looking out for? Because I literally just like look in my knickers, and if there's something that's obvious to me, I'm like, oh, okay. But if it's not obvious to me, then I don't go hunting for it, for lack of a better phrase.
There are different schools of thought when it comes to FAM on how to assess that discharge. But through my training, the best way is just to look at it. What's in your knickers?
Right. Okay. That's like the easiest and most accessible way as well, I feel.
It is easy because then you're not having to rummage, and there's it's not necessary to rummage, Just like keep an eye on it. The feeling, it essentially is the sensation at vulva. The thing to bear in mind when we're discussing this is that people's discharge varies from person to person. So your discharge won't mirror my discharge. And so it's important just to tune in and see what yours looks like month to month.
Post menstruation and like post ovulation, I tend to kind of like not even notice it. So I'm never like inputting that data. It's usually when it's like creamy, or like the one that's called like the egg white discharge, where it's like really stringy. Those are the only two that I really notice.
That's actually perfect to start inputting that. So start inputting when you start producing that discharge, because that's really important to know. Because if you were avoiding pregnancy, then you would want to avoid pregnancy at any point when there's discharge at the beginning of your cycle.
So like the first day that you notice that discharge, you're like, right,
yeah, that's
ovulate any day now, let's stop.
Yeah. That's it, you're fertile as soon as there's any discharge. But then after you've ovulated and had a confirmed ovulation, then you're infertile and you can go back to having sex without any contraceptives. And you're looking for, first of all, when it starts, and then your peak, that like peak day where it's like the best it is. That's important.
What is the best? Is it like volumes, a certain kind of consistency? Is that like the egg white stuff is the peak?
Yeah, it depends on you, because once you tract, you'll see, like, you might not be somebody that ever has that stringy egg white, but you just might feel really wet,
Right.
So, but it's when you know that you are at your wettest.
So you wouldn't necessarily know it was your peak until maybe a couple of days after, when you're like, I think that was the peak.
Exactly. Okay. So that's why we then track those, because obviously you've got your peak discharge, and essentially that would happen at around the time when you've got your first temperature rise, and you're tracking to find those 3 higher temperatures anyway. So but in that time, your discharge will then start reverting back, and you're tracking that, and then only then will you be able to draw in that line, the cover line, which is what the app does for you. And says, that's when you've ovulated. Oh, look, that's when my peak discharge was. Well, we were going to discuss the chart, and I wanted to share my screen with you as well.
Yes.
The time you take your temperature, do you do it every morning at the same time?
Roughly, I would say on weekdays it's like 7:30, and then weekends, maybe like 7:30, maybe 8:30, I'll still wake up then, and I'll take my temperature and then probably fall back asleep.
That's great. As long as you're taking it at the same time
Yeah.
every morning.
What's
then
kind of
that's
like the recommended window?
There isn't really, as long
Okay.
as you've had 3 hours consecutive sleep, because that's what people worry about. It's like, oh, well, I like wake up for a wee in the middle of the night. Like, can I sleep
Yeah,
through
because
it?
I was going to ask that as well, because I have to get up in the middle of the night to empty my stoma bag. I didn't realize it was 3 hours, because last night I got up to empty my stoma bag at like 6 and then woke up again at 7:30. So that wouldn't be a good one.
No.
Oh no. Okay.
Not necessarily. I mean, you can, after a while, you'll start to see your pattern and you'll know
Yeah.
if it's like made it wildly inaccurate. And the same time, so an hour, you would want to adjust that. If it was an hour earlier or an hour later, you'd want to adjust that temperature, which you can do. So if it's an hour earlier, then you'd want to increase it. So it's a box.
Oh. So you
So-
can actually like manually go, it would be this.
Yeah. So say you took your temperature in the morning and it was 36.2, say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you took it an hour, so you were saying an hour later of the weekend.
Yeah.
You would then bring it down a box so that you've adjusted it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to adjust it, if you do that, just so that you can manually do that. It's good to know. But
So
everything
you would,
else,
for 1 hour, you would just
for every 30,
bring it down a 0.05.
Yeah, I didn't make that clear. It's actually for every 30 minutes. So if it was one box for every 30 minutes. So say you took it at 36.2 and you took it 30 minutes later, so you'd bring it down one box, another 30 minutes, another box. So an hour is essentially 2 boxes. You can see that there was a lovely increase, yeah?
Lovely. Yeah.
So on day 15, first increase. Wonderful. Can you see it? Day 2, lovely increase. And then on day 3, there wasn't that 0.2 shift that we needed there. So what they've done is they've included a 4th temperature in that to do the 3 flashes. So it's like flash 1, flash 2, flash 3 shows you've had a 0.2 increase.
Yeah.
And that makes it really visual then when you've drawn that in. And you see that they've just included a 4th day in there to make sure that they had that clear temperature rise. And you can see here it's continued high then. You always have like a drop in temperature just before your period, yeah? So day, like 1 or 2 days before. Or if you're looking to achieve, the beauty of this is if you were looking to achieve and you continue to have high temperatures, and you continue to have high temperatures after when you would normally have a period, that would be a successful chart. You would be deemed pregnant.
Right.
So this person here, look, they wrote their period and their spotting. This person actually goes from nothing at all to feeling quite wet.
Yeah.
Whereas that
amount 3, does that mean like if you're rating it like 1, 2, 3, that means it's like
the most that they rated it. So you've got to remember that everyone's tuning in. So this person here would have been working with me. So they're only in the first 3 cycles, which is why it's a good example to show, because everyone's learning at the beginning. When you're looking at it, we're writing down lots of different points about our discharge. I mean, you'll never have described your discharge in such an intimate way ever before, but it gives you a rounded picture of it, right? But what you're looking for is what we're talking about is the peak, right? So you can see their peak, okay? And this is how when you're writing it down, you can see it. So their peak was day 15, yeah?
Yeah. So how did you know it was a peak? So
retrospectively, you write in that it was a peak, yeah. So they were wet. They were at 3, they were cloudy, and they were stretchy, yeah? But then on day 16, they've written that they were moist, not wet. Then they've said they only had 2, the amount of 2 rather than 3. They said they were white, not cloudy, and they said they were slippery, yeah? Then suddenly on day 17, they're dry, they're back to 1, they're white, they're pasty. Now, if you look at that, day 18 they missed, but then on day 19 it's pretty clear they're dry, they're back to pasty. So when you retrospectively look at it, you can go, oh, day 15 was their peak, because you can see then that it's switching back. So then this is the summary, right? So this is the summary that you would colour in. Get the colouring pencils out, the highlighter out, whatever you want, and you just colour it in. And then what is then easy to see is where your peak is. Really easy then, because can you see that all the boxes are coloured here? And then it starts to get less boxes.
Oh, okay. Okay, this looks a lot less daunting to me now. I feel like I know what I'm gonna do. So thank you so much, Naomi. I'll leave links to her website and her socials in the description, and the paper version of things that I was using was one that she'd created. Hi, it's Hannah from the end of filming this video. This is going to be a really long video, so really do strap in. We get thorough. We really get into each of these apps. So for those of you who this is going to be useful for, thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoy. Please leave your thoughts on all of these apps, like if you have different experiences to me, in the comments. If you use any different apps and you want to share like your reviews of these in the comments, like go for it. I'm really sorry this video is so long, but I just had a lot to say. I've been using these apps for months. I had a lot of thoughts and opinions. Okay, on with the video. Enjoy. So the way that this video is going to work is that I have split my review into different criteria, and I'll tell you how I feel about each of the apps and how they hit that criteria or that thing, how well they do that thing. And we have a point system. So 0 points means bad, you didn't do it good. 1 point means, yeah, you did it. Okay, great. Okay, room for improvement. Cool. And number 2 is like, oh yeah, you do this really well. Like, that's great. And then what we'll do is we'll add up all of the points at the end and see who is the overall winner. Which app/apps am I going to keep and which ones am I binning? So the criteria is predictions, the process of inputting temperatures, symptoms, and bleeding, the graph, the calendar view, the statistics, the company's business model and ethics, and their data and privacy policy. Woo, woo, woo. So as you can see, that is a lot to get through. Let's dive in. First up, predictions. I am not going to go through like every single prediction that each of the apps made and like what the actual like real result was. We're just going to go through a bit of an overview. So Clue was really bad at predicting my cycle. And I don't know if that's Clue's fault, but also like my cycle was super irregular. Like I thought I was doing real good with an average of like a 35-day cycle. And then when I was doing this video, I had a 49er and a 44er. So Clue also recently got rid of the fertile window, so they don't actually show that in the app anymore. You can turn on to see when you'll potentially be ovulating. They gave a bunch of reasons as to why they were doing this, but also my suspicion is that they recently have a birth control version of the app that has been FDA approved, so for use in the United States as birth control. And so I think that they've removed that feature from the main app because that will be a feature in this like birth control version. That's my hunch. So Clue does say that it uses your temperature input for its predictions, but I would disagree because I'm inputting my temperature and I've gone past what they think is my ovulation day, but my temperature like still hasn't risen, and they don't move it. So they don't like readjust the ovulation day, and they also don't readjust the length of my cycle based on the data that I'm inputting, which me as someone who now like has an okay understanding of FAM, I would change my predictions in my head, and Clue is just like, no, I think we got it right and we're just gonna stick with it. And I'm like, but you're wrong. You're so wrong. And it keeps doing that thing every time you put in info, like Clue is getting smarter. And I'm like, are you though? And because Clue has already decided when it thinks that your period is going to begin and then doesn't change that throughout your cycle as you start putting in this information, it just gets to a point where every time I open the Clue app, it's just like, your period starts tomorrow. Your period starts tomorrow. And I'm like, it's not. Like, I haven't even ovulated yet, Clue, and you should know this. My period is definitely not starting tomorrow. Kindara does like an actual okay job. Like, it changes when it thinks that your ovulation is going to occur and how long your cycle is going to be based on the data that you put in. But it doesn't do it kind of like using its own algorithm, I guess. Like, you actually have to manually say, This is the temp rise. This was my peak cervical mucus. I don't actually know if they use cervical mucus in their calculations, but you have to manually say, this was the day of my temperature rise. It then like moves around and it changes. It goes, oh, okay, recalculating, and then things move. That being said, it still didn't get it right. Ever. It got close, but it didn't ever get it right. Natural cycles is similar in that it does change. However, it does it completely automatically. So I don't put in saying, oh, this is the temperature rise. Natural cycles is just there like waiting and like being like, oh, was that a temperature rise? Was that a temperature rise? And it does this thing where it's like, ooh, waiting to confirm ovulation, which is what you have to do with the like paper method and like the manual method as well, is that you see the temp rise one day, but then it's not confirmed until you see that increase for 3 days. And there's that increase on day 3. Because then after I've had like a few high temperatures, it's then like, okay, yes, ovulation confirmed. It doesn't include any of your cervical mucus data in the algorithm. And again, natural cycles still never got it right. They still never predicted my cycle length. Again, got close. They got real close, but no. Oh, Ovia. So Ovia gives you a fertility score, which basically like goes up during your fertile window, but it does not adapt this at all based on the data that you're putting in. It only changes once you manually input ovulation, and then it suddenly like shifts everything, which to me just seems completely pointless because your fertile window is before you ovulate. So once you know that you've ovulated and you've put it in, it's like, oh, your fertile window is then. I'm like, I know, thank you, I know. But yeah, so it's another one that just like, it doesn't change as you're putting in the data. It just would never move. I would get past the fertile window that Ovia said was my fertile window, and I was like, I've still not ovulated yet. And then I would ovulate like a week later, and I was like, well, that definitely wasn't my fertile window. This week was. And then with Read Your Body and the FAM paper method, neither of these do predictions. And that's not because they're bad at doing predictions. It's like a stance. It's like, you can't predict this shit. Like, it's on purpose. And one of the things that I've learned is that it's not about like taking your cycle and using that to kind of like predict future ones, but it's about like your current cycle and using your current cycle to predict your current cycle. So they don't do predictions, but I would say for good reason. So for the predictions category, no one is getting a 2-pointer. Clues on 0, Kindara's on 1, Natural Cycles on 1, Ovia on 0, and Read Your Body on 1, and FAM paper method also on 1. Okay, so now we're moving on to just the experience, the user experience of putting in temperatures, adding in symptoms, bleeding, like all of that. Just how did it all work smushed together? So with Clue, it has an automatic decimal point in, so I don't have to manually put in a decimal point, which may seem really minor, but I loved it because I just had to put in the numbers and I didn't have to be like, right, decimal point. Great. One thing that did frustrate me is that you can't edit the colors of all of the different like symptoms and stuff that you can like input into Clue. So the temperature is dark blue, that's the color that it appears. And basically when you're looking at Clue in like the home screen or like in the calendar view, it just like comes up with these little squares of the color of that thing. So at a glance, you can kind of be like, oh, that's what's happening on those days, that's what's happening on those days, because you kind of like know what color is what. However, the temperature is dark blue, and it's the same dark blue as the like physical pain symptoms. So things like cramps, ovulation pain, and tender breasts, like all of those are dark blue. And because I'm inputting my temperature every single day, there's a blue box. So I can't see at a glance what my pattern is with cramps and boob pain. I do really love the cartoon images that they have for the different symbols. I love like the flip-flops as unprotected sex and like the boot as like protected sex. Big fan of their illustrations, especially their cervical mucus illustrations. There is something about the like patterned symbols that they have come up with to describe like sticky and creamy and egg white and like all of that just like perfectly communicate to my brain. Like I don't know what it is, but whenever I'm like looking in my pants and I'm like, what is that? Is that sticky or creamy? I like think of the Clue symbols for creamy and sticky, And I'm like, oh, I get it. Like there's just something about it that just clicks for me, and that's great. One of the things that I really love about Clue is that you can pick what kind of symptoms that you want to track, and so you can like hide some and like have others there, and you can change the order, because obviously like you scroll through them, and so on that first page you only have 3. So I would pick like the 3 that I use the most and the 3 that I input the most to be on that first page, and then you can kind of like have it in order of like how often you go to input that thing, and I really like that. So with Kindara, they don't have the decimal point, unfortunately. I have to manually put that in. Yes, this is going to be a repeated issue for me. So they don't actually include a ovulation pain symptom option, only menstrual cramps, which actually when I first started using the app was called abdominal cramps, and then they changed it to menstrual cramps, which makes sense because as someone who has an inflammatory bowel disease, I know that there is a difference between abdominal cramps and menstrual cramps. They're in entirely different places of the body. However, they list their symptoms in alphabetical order, and it doesn't like save your favorites to the top, and you can't like move around the order. And so at least when it was abdominal cramps, it was like right up at the top, and so I could easily find it. But now that it's menstrual cramps, I'm like, menstrual cramps, like, okay, there you are. As well as describing the different kind of consistencies and amount of cervical fluid, you also would manually input like what your peak day is. So it has that function as well. So you can be like, this day was the peak. And you can also add what time you took your temperature. Now, this is not a feature that I used, but it got me thinking about what Naomi said about if you take your temperature an hour later, then decrease it, and then if you take your temperature a bit earlier, then increase it. And maybe Kindara does that work for you if you tell it what time you're taking your temperature, like maybe it adjusts it, but I don't know. I got too scared to try it. I was just like, I know that this works, so I'm just gonna keep doing this. So with Kindara, you can also add intensities of like mild and medium or severe cramps, boob pain, like whatever it is. And I do really like that. My only gripe is just that it's just this big long list, and it's just like, I wanna have favorites, or I just wanna like delete most of them because I don't experience most of these things. Or I don't care to track them as well. So natural cycles is another one with that decimal point. I love the decimal point, thank you. I don't know what it is, but like maybe it's the fact that I have to do it 5 times every morning. So the ones that like include that decimal point, I'm like, thank you for saving me a split second of time. So when you open the Natural Cycles app, you can immediately like input your temperature when you open it, which is like their main gimmick, like instantly input your temperature. However, once you have inputted your data for the day, I found it really difficult to find where to edit it. So if later in the day I had some cervical mucus that I wanted to put in the app, I was like, where the fuck do I go? I don't see the input screen anymore. And it's really not obvious. It's like this tiny little tick in the top right hand corner, which I think means like done, you inputted your data that morning, done. But you can click it and then click edit. And it's just a bit clunky and just not user friendly, because I was just like, where is this thing? I cannot find it. Also, you can't just say that your temperature was disturbed. You have to give a reason, and they only have 3 available, which is that you are sick, you slept different, and that you're hungover. There are plenty of other reasons why your temperature might be disturbed, but you just have to like pick one of those. I thought that was really weird. But my favorite thing about the Natural Cycles app is how the buttons feel, and I don't understand it. Maybe someone can explain this to me in the comments, but it's obviously just a screen, but it has this like feature where it feels like you're physically pressing something and there's like some resistance to it, and it is so satisfying. So with Ovia, there is just like a lot of content and clutter like in the app, and it doesn't immediately take you to the like inputting your data screen. It just takes you to like, I don't even know, like the home screen, and there's like blog content and I don't know, it's weird. Like I said, it does allow you to manually input when you ovulated, which at first I thought that this was really great, but then it just grew to annoy me. My biggest gripe with Ovia, the thing that just like frustrated me to no end, is that when it comes to the time when the app like predicted that your period would start, most apps would just like let that go, right? They think that your period is starting today, but you don't input the data. So it's like, okay, so maybe it's going to be tomorrow. Like, that's kind of like what most apps would do. However, what Ovia does is that it automatically inputs your period. So on the days where I'm not bleeding because I've got a really long cycle, but Ovia is like, oh, your period should be starting today, it like just does that for me. And so I have to like scroll down and actually unclick it. I have to uncheck, be like, no, I am not bleeding today, Ovia. Please, like, don't think that you know my body better than me. Like, how dare you? It's very annoying. And even on like day one of what it thinks is your cycle, and unclicking period, it will still do it for the next like 4 or 5 days. Read Your Body, again, doesn't have the decimal point. Real sad about that, Read Your Body. But the thing with Read Your Body is that it is entirely customizable. So it does include like a few things like sex, your period, your mucus, like checking your cervix, I think is one as well, pregnancy tests and LH tests. Like it has like some of like the core stuff, but anything that is like PMS style symptoms that like varies from person to person, but then also lifestyle stuff. So like, do you want to track partying, drinking, exercise, like travel? Do you want to track those things as well? Entirely customizable. And it took me a while to figure out how it actually worked, but you can like create your own like custom settings. So do you want something where it's like you're picking between different emojis? Do you want something where you're tracking like the intensity, like 1, 2, 3 of something? Do you want something where you're tracking like it's either on or off each day? It's really cool. It is a bit clunky and a bit like you have to get your head around it. And if you create one, it's really difficult to then edit it, and you would just like have to delete and start again. And it's definitely for the more committed who want to like create like a full chart and like really see like their lifestyle and all of their symptoms all against like their temperature and their mucus and their fertility. Like this thing has a lot of potential if you're super committed. It's also one where you add your own interpretations. So it doesn't do the work for you, but you input your day 1 of temp rise, and then you also input what was be considered like a confirmed ovulation or like confirmed temperature rise. You also input like, this was like the first day of feeling fertile kind of mucus, and then this was the peak day, and you input that data manually. And then also like the cover line, so if you're doing like the temperatures and like the 3 that are above the line, like with Candara it automatically puts in that line, but with Read Your Body, like it actually kind of talks you through how you calculate where that line is, and then you input it yourself, which I really liked. I really liked that, like, oh my god, I'm doing it myself, and like, thank you for educating me. One thing with the cervical mucus at the start kind of annoyed me is that it wasn't actually giving me the different types, so I couldn't say if it was sticky or creamy or egg whitey. It literally was just like, is it peak or is it non-peak? Which really confused me because I was like, but I could have non-peak discharge that's like different kinds of discharge. But they also have a dry option. And so what I decided to do is, because I basically have kind of 3 types of discharge. I've got like the sticky dry stuff, and then the creamy wet stuff, and then like the really slippery egg white stuff. So I decided that I will just be like, okay, dry is that one, non-peak is that one, and then peak is that one. So I can still visually see, it's just not like as clear, but maybe that's why. Maybe, and then like in your customizable ones, you can kind of like go ham. So with the FAM paper method, obviously it's completely customizable because you can create your own and you can just kind of just do whatever you want with it, and you can like find one that works for you. I will say it is so satisfying using a pencil and like drawing the line with the ruler. Oh, I got a ruler for this. It was so good. And also my favorite thing about this was that I could keep the paper in my bedroom, because I do not sleep with my phone in my bedroom. So what I would have to do is always remember what my temperature was that morning, and then when eventually I'm like on my phone later that day, I'll input the temperatures. Luckily, I don't know if other thermometers do this, but with the Natural Cycles one, it retains your last temperature. So if I do forget, I just go back to the thermometer, I press it, and it'll like show me what my last temperature was. But with FAM, it's just like, it's right there in my bedroom and I can do it as soon as I wake up. Great. So the points for inputting your temperatures and symptoms and bleeding and stuff, basically everyone gets 1 point except for Ovia, who gets 0 points, because they basically all had like some good things that I really liked and then some downfalls. Next up is the graph. Oh, boy. One of my favorite things about doing my temperature every day is just having a graph and looking at this graph. It's so fascinating. I love it. So clue, the graph is shit. This app is not a fertility tracking app. It is a menstrual tracking app. The graph that it gives you literally tells you nothing. It did briefly change, like they changed it ever so slightly, which was slightly less shit, but still shit. Like, it tells you nothing. Kindara, oh, beautiful graph. Nice, clear graph. I love the blocks. I love that when you tell it that you've had a temperature rise, it does the numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, after your temperature has risen. Natural cycles. Some people might really like this graph. I did not gel with this graph. The line is smoothed out, and I would just much prefer a really clear, like this day, this day, this day, like straight lines, instead of it being smoothed out and you can't like quite see what is happening on what day. And the line is in different colors for different parts of the cycle, which actually I personally found that made it harder to understand than easier to understand. Now here's the thing, the line becomes red during your fertile window, which for me was completely counterintuitive because red means stop, red means danger. And as someone who's trying to conceive, no, my fertile window is the time when it's like, go, 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 go. And so what I did, I flipped between the birth control version and the planned pregnancy version of the app. And it's exactly the same, but I wish that they'd flipped it. Like I wish for in the planned pregnancy app, they flipped around the red and the green, because that would just like make so much more sense. Also very confusing. I double checked and I was definitely in the planned pregnancy version of the app, and I was at ovulation and it was telling me to use protection. And I was like, is this a glitch? Or have they just really not customized and like tweaked the things that you need to tweak for the planned pregnancy version? And they just like copy and pasted the birth control one with all of the like copy in the language as well. It was very strange. One thing that you can do with the natural cycles graphs is that you can compare graphs side by side, which looks really cool. I don't know how useful it is. And then there's also this like block view, which made no sense. I was just like, what the fuck, how is this useful? With Ovia, the graph is really hard to find. It's not very obvious where it is. You can scroll through all of your cycles quite seamlessly, but because it's got this fertility score, it's got an extra line on the graph. So you've got your temperature tracking line, and then you've also got this fertility score line, which it's just completely confusing, and I don't care, and it's just like adding more clutter to the graph that really doesn't need to be there. But their whole gimmick is that we give you a fertility score each day, but I just don't care, and it's not like important. They're not giving me any new information with that fertility score. With Read Your Body, similar to Kindara, just like beautiful, nice, clear graph with blocks and straight lines. You input the value of your cover line, and when you've said that you've had a temperature rise, it like adds the numbers on it, and it's just like all very satisfying. It looks great, and because the symptoms and stuff are so customizable, you can like pick what emojis you have, so you can like fully like make it look like your beautiful graph. And it's very functional and very easy to read and understand. And then with the fan paper method, again, lovely blocks, we love it. However, the issue for me with this graph is that it's not long enough. Like the one that Naomi gave me, it goes up to 40 days, which probably works for the majority of people. However, I've had to spill over onto another page, which then you like have 2 pages for one cycle, and it's just a bit clunky and a bit annoying, and it just doesn't make it very clear as to like what's happening. So points, clue 0, Kindara 2, natural cycles 0, Ovia 0, Read Your Body 2, fan paper method 1. So next up is the calendar view, which is personally not one that I really use or look at that much, but let's have a look and see what's going on. So for clue on the calendar view, same issue with that blue dot. Like if I put in my temperature every day, like that blue square appears every day, and so I cannot clearly see at a glance my boob pain or like any cramp pain. But what you can do in calendar view is click on a day, and like it comes up at the bottom to see the specific data, and that's actually quite a little nifty thing, and it's not too clunky or difficult to use. Before I was inputting my temperature into Clue, I actually found their calendar view really useful because I could see at a glance everything that was going on, but now my temperature in there, it's just like, it's all blue. So I do think that their calendar view is really good. It just doesn't really function if you're using Clue to track your temperature, which, as we've kind of already established, probably don't use Clue to track your temperature because it's pointless. Kindara's calendar shows you a bunch of different things like your fertile window, your menstruation and sexual activity, and cervical mucus, which is like different shades, and it's very subtle, so it's not super clear with that. And if you do click on a day in the calendar, instead of it just like popping up with your symptoms but staying on the calendar view, it just takes you to that day's data input page, which is a bit annoying. Natural cycles calendar view, thanks, I hate it. Your period is in green? Why is the period in green? The rest is all like this faded red and then dark red for like ovulation. I want my period to be in red and I want my fertile window to be green. Like, I'm in the Plan Pregnancy app. Like, surely that's how it should be. Ovia's calendar view has like the top half of your screen is the calendar, and then the bottom half, it like clearly shows what data like that you inputted that day. So it is clear to see what's going on, but the calendar view itself only shows your period, ovulation, fertile window, and any sexual activity. So you can't see at a glance any of those other symptoms. For Read Your Body, the calendar view only shows bleeding and cervical mucus. If you're inputting that info in every day, like your cervical fluid every single day, I can imagine it's really useful. But for me, it's just like very sporadic, like mostly gaps. My calendar is very patchy. And with the fat and paper method, a calendar view in this sense just doesn't exist. You would need like multiple pieces of paper to like really compare, and I think it would just be a bit clunky and difficult. So for points, I'm still going to give Clue 2 because pre-doing my temperature, like I really like their calendar feature. Kindara gets 1, Natural Cycles gets 0, Ovia gets 1, Read Your Body gets 1, and Fan Paper Method gets 0. Next up is the statistics, and this is one of my favorite bits. Like, give me that data, baby. So Clue gives you an overview of your average cycle length, period length, and the cycle variation. However, like, I don't think it was accurate for me because it was giving very different averages from the other apps. Have we been having the same menstrual cycle? Like, I just told you I had a 49-day menstrual cycle, and you're still telling me that my cycle variation is only this many days when actually like it's very clear that my cycle variation is like this many days. I really love the Your Cycle History feature of like how it actually shows that information. Like, it just works visually with my brain. It makes a lot of sense. I really like seeing that. However, if you're tracking many different symptoms, it can look really chaotic. For me though, I'm basically just tracking like my temperature, my bleeding, my mucus, and sex, and boob pain and cramps. Like, those are the main things that I'm tracking because that's kind of like what my cycle includes. But if you were tracking like other lifestyle stuff like exercise and parties and drinking, then it will be chaotic. But you can turn these off in the cycle history setting. So if you find that it's super chaotic but you're like, I don't need to see those ones, then you can like turn those ones off. So you can just see the ones that you want to see. Kindara's is really well laid out and just like really clear to understand with like your averages and then also like your range. Because you're inputting your temperatures, it also tells you what your average and range for your follicular, I'm never gonna be able to say that, follicular phase and your luteal phase. It gives you those as well, which is really cool. And it also tells you like how much you had sex and like how much you input the other symptoms as well. And it's just like beautifully laid out. I love it. With natural cycles, it's a bit clunky and unclear where to go to find this information, and it's kind of like pretty graphic design in terms of how it's laid out, but it's not actually like giving me any useful information. It does break down the different phases of the menstrual cycle and like the lengths and the ranges, but I'm just not a fan of like how it's displayed. It just doesn't work with my brain. Ovia's is also really difficult to find. You have to go to more and then go to cycle trends, and that's where it is. It doesn't give you any ranges. It just kind of says, this is your average length, this is your average this is your average that, this is your average ovulation day, da da da. It also has this thing where it says fertile window sex, and it's like out of 6, and I don't understand. Is that like how many times you had sex in your fertile window? Read Your Body statistics comes in a table, and I love it. This just makes it really easy to like compare each cycle and like see the averages and see the range. It gives you cycle length, menstruation length. It gives you the day of each start of your temperature rise. It gives you the number of high temperatures when your peak fluid was and the number of days in your cycle post peak fluid. It tells you your fertile window length, which I don't really understand, but that also might be because I've not inputted my personal interpretations of stuff correctly, because a lot of that stuff in that table is based off the things that you inputted, not its own algorithms. And statistics with the fan paper method, you got to do it, baby. You got to do it yourself. It doesn't do it for you. If you want to do it, you got to create your own spreadsheet, get a Google sheet out, do it yourself, which I tried to do and then just stopped, couldn't be bothered. It's for the more committed for sure. So points for statistics, Clue gets 1 point, Kindara gets 2 points, Natural Cycles gets 1 point, Ovia gets 0 points, Read Your Body gets 2, and FAM gets 1. It's getting 1 for doing nothing, but like, you can still do it yourself. There's complete freedom there. So next up is the business model and ethics of these companies, and I think this is just really important just in general, like as humans, with like the apps that we use and the companies that we endorse and like give our money to, but also in this case they're dealing with really sensitive health information about us. So it might be good to see who are the people who are running these companies and what are their ethics. So the research for this section and the next section with data and privacy was done by Laura Shipp. Laura is currently researching period and fertility tracking apps as the focus of her PhD, and she is just generally interested in how our experiences of periods shape our lives. And Laura will actually be joining me for the data and privacy policy stuff and talking through what she found there. But I just wanted to say thank you so much, Laura, for helping me with this video. And I'll leave links in the description to where you can find out more about her and her work. So Clue is a Berlin-based company. They are woman-owned, founded by Ida Tin in 2013. They are venture capitalist backed, and then they also have the Clue Plus subscription membership, which is also how they get some of their income. They are very much a mission-based company in terms of moving menstrual and reproductive health forwards, and they're really transparent about how they make money. I'll leave a link in the description to a blog post that they did about how they make money and the principles and promises that they have around that. They were also the first one of these kinds of apps to really include and champion gender neutral language and colors, and they're available in 15 different languages. Kindara was founded by a husband and wife team around 2011, 2012, and then they were acquired by Primatemp in 2018. They are also VC backed, and then obviously have this subscription model, and they also sell products. Their main one at the moment is like something that you can put in your vagina to take your temperature every morning. It's very expensive. I don't know if it's like ready available or still in beta, but that's a thing. They do use gender neutral colors, but there is this general assumption that their users are mostly heterosexual and cis. They do have a lot of focus on the science and the research in terms of menstrual and reproductive health. They have published research, but a lot of it's been done with competing interests, which does raise some questions about its legitimacy, and it is currently only available in English. Natural Cycles, also founded by a husband and wife team around 2017. They are VC backed, they have a subscription model, and they sell products like the thermometer. They were the first ever approved contraceptive app, and a few years ago they actually got in a bit of trouble because there was a lot of unintended pregnancies, and you may have remembered a lot of news stories from around that time. And they also got in trouble with the ASA, which is the Advertising Standards Agency here in the UK, in terms of some of the language that they used in their advertisements around the efficacy of the app. But now on their website, they include statistics of the efficacy in terms of perfect use and typical use. And they have a quiz in terms of determining if using Natural Cycles as a form of birth control is right for you. However, I did the quiz and I input answers on purpose that I think would be somebody who shouldn't use the app. Like if a friend of mine was like, I'm a shift worker and I have a really like off sleep schedule and I drink a lot and like all of this kind of stuff. If a friend of mine with all of these things, oh, and I have PCOS, like came to me with this, I would say, maybe not best for you. However, what Natural Cycles said was a few things you might want to consider before using our app. And I was just like, yeah, fair. Yeah, okay, you want everyone to use your app. You're not going to be like, no, not for you. You don't use it. But I don't know. I personally think that there will be some people who it just like, that kind of app doesn't work for. They do have lots of focus on science and statistics and have published research. The colours are also gender neutral and it's just in English. The Ovia Fertility app are part of Ovia Health, who have a lot of different apps. They're co-founded by a group of men and women, and one of the male founders is now the CEO. They are VC backed and they have a lot of partnerships with insurance companies and employers. The app is free, and so most of their income does come from those B2B relationships. The app does have a gender neutral colour scheme, but images on the website all seem to be like cis and hetero, but there is a section of their employees where it does include their pronouns. Also lots of talk about science and understanding women's health, and the app is available in English and Spanish. Read Your Body is a collective, and instead of having like a CEO, they have a key facilitator who is a woman and a fertility expert. They are a non-profit and they were crowdfunded to get started, and they now have a subscription-based model, which is really low though. It's the cheapest of the ones that do have a paid subscription. Very much gender and sexuality inclusive in design and in language. And with it being a collective, the app was developed with 36 beta testers who are all credited on the website, and those who are also translating the app into lots of other language are also credited on the website as well. And with the paper fan method, like, you don't have to worry about any of this stuff because you can just create your own. So in terms of points here, Clue gets 2, Kindara and Natural Cycles get 1 each, Ovia gets 0 points, Read Your Body gets 2, and the fan paper method also gets 2. And so onto the data and privacy stuff. Here is my chat with Laura Shipp. So what is Clue's data and privacy policy like?
I think Clue do a really good job at this. They kind of provide information to people, to you as a user, within like blog posts, but they also have a really good privacy policy in terms of how they set things out, what they collect and where it's going, which I think is really positive. Clue's quite good because they really limit the amount of third parties that they include within the app, which I think is a really positive thing. So they are also minimizing how much information can be collected by those third parties. And then finally, the thing that I think is really cool about Clue is the fact that they are also using that information to inform studies around menstrual health and fertility. And what's quite nice is that they then publish those studies on the website. You can access them and also see the institutions that they're working with, which I think, yeah, is really positive. What I think is really nice about Clue is the fact that they were probably the first app to kind of ask whether they should be making money from this kind of menstrual health data. It generated a bit of a problem for them in terms of having to work out how to make money, which is why they have their subscription service. But yeah, they were the first kind of app to be like, maybe we shouldn't be selling this data to anyone else. And maybe that's a bit of an ethical issue. So I think that's a really, really good thing.
So how many points would you give Clue for data and privacy?
I think I'd give them a solid 2 points.
So what about Kindara?
So they also have a kind of commitment to not sell or share personal information. But I found that they did use quite a few or kind of 3 or 4 third-party services within their app. And within their privacy policy, which I would say is really good, they kind of set things out quite nicely, and they have kind of summary and things to make it a bit more accessible. But it's a bit unclear for me as kind of a researcher looking at this, what those third parties are collecting, which I think is, maybe a bit kind of something where there's kind of room for improvement in future. But I did really like that there was kind of a control mechanism for you as a user. So you're able to share information with a healthcare provider or with a partner, but you're able to kind of control how much is shared with those groups, and you can like revoke access as well, which is something that a lot of apps haven't had.
So how many points would you give Kindara?
I think I'd give it a 1, maybe some room for improvement.
And what about Natural Cycles?
Natural Cycles, a bit like Clue, have got this kind of blog post or other post on their website which talks about kind of how they look after their users' data. And it's like a mission statement, so it's a bit more of a kind of like, this is what we will do and this is what we won't do, which I think is a really good thing. And also within their privacy policy, they do a really good job of breaking down exactly the kinds, like the categories of data that they collect and where all of those things are going. So that might be kind of account information, but then that's separate from the information you're putting in about your temperature and your cycle. So I think that's a really positive thing, because if you're just trying to get a sense of what's going on with the app, you can scroll through that and just see the table and get quite a good idea. So that, yeah, I think is really positive. And they also, again, use quite limited third-party services. The only place where they are doing that is kind of trying to understand how you compare to the rest of their audience, which, you know, that does still include kind of like some information which can be kind of related back to you. But they kind of really explain that well, I think. So the only thing that kind of lets natural cycles down is the fact that where they're using this information for advertising purposes is in a way that has been kind of a bit dodgy in terms of who they're targeting and how they're targeting people to kind of invite them to use the app in the way that's kind of got them into trouble with the ASA in the past.
So how many points does Natural Cycles get?
I think I'd give it a 1, just because of that little niggly point, which, I think ruins it a little bit for me.
Ovia, how are they doing?
Ovia, for me, are a bit too data hungry for my liking. So they should be making money from kind of, they're working with businesses, that's how they kind of generate their money. But they do use quite a lot of third parties. And it's unclear to me within the app, within the privacy policies, how that's being used. But we know they've kind of generally said that it's used for some kind of advertisement. They do say in the privacy policy that you can limit that, but it is kind of a bit more like, why are they doing it in the first place to me, given they've already they're already finding a way to generate revenue. Yeah, the app's just a bit data hungry, so it kind of invites you to add all of this information in. You have to fill out a questionnaire, and it's unclear where that information is kind of feeding back to you as a user in terms of the kind of insights it's giving you. So I think that's a bit of a red flag, because obviously that means that they're collecting that information for their own purpose rather than something that benefits you and your experience of the app. I would say it does have quite a good privacy policy if you have the time to read it. Kind of it's a long old thing. They kind of separate it out into sections and give a summary, but you're able to kind of click for more information if you want more. That's really positive. They allow you to kind of input a photo within the app, and for me, I don't really understand what benefit that gives you as a user, but obviously it is another piece of information for them to have as a company. So yeah, some questions there about how much they need and how much is kind of overreaching for them as a company.
So how many points are Ovia getting?
I'm going to give Ovia a 0, because I just think they've got some things to work on there.
Finally, Read Your Body.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Read Your Body. I think it's great to see a value-driven app. And they have a really different model from all of the other apps we've talked about, because they're not for profit. So it can change like what they can do within the app, and they don't need to collect any data in order to kind of exist. They're completely privacy driven. Yes, so the data is only stored on your phone. It doesn't go anywhere else. But they also have quite a handy feature which allows you to create an encrypted backup, which means that it will be stored safely for you in case you lose your phone, but they can't see that or access that in any way. So yeah, I think that's really helpful.
So how many points do Read Your Body get?
They get a firm 2. I think they're great, and really support what they do.
Okay, the results. Oh my god. Well done if you got this far in the video. Holy shit. I didn't realize how thorough I would be, but turns out I was like, no, I'm gonna do this fucking properly. So I actually had already decided which apps I wanted to continue using and which apps I would be deleting before I added up the scores. So I am no longer going to be using Ovia, Kindara, and Natural Cycles. Those ones I will be getting rid of. I will be keeping Clue, but I won't be using it to input my temperature. I'm only really going to be using it as a menstrual tracking app. I am considering getting Clue Plus just to kind of like see what that is, and also just because I like the company and I'm curious as to what's behind the paywall and genuinely want to support them. But I will be using Read Your Body as my main menstrual charting fertility tracking app. That one is going to be my main one. So I still will be using 2, and I think I won't be using the paper method anymore, because Read Your Body is essentially like the paper method in an app, and it's just a lot more flexible for me with that really long cycle that I have. But the points. So there was a total of 14 points available if you scored 2 in every category. So Clue finished with 8 out of 14 points. Kindara got 9 out of 14 points. Natural Cycles got 5. Ovia got 1. Wow. Read Your Body got 11 out of 14 points. Well done, Read Your Body. And the Paper Method got 8 out of 14 points. Now, before we end this, obviously, this is all entirely subjective and basically like my experiences, and also obviously like Laura's scores for the business and the like privacy policy stuff. And your experiences with these apps may be completely different to mine, and that is okay. If you made it to the end of this video, because oh my goodness, if you made it to the end of this video, leave this emoji in the comments. I don't normally do this, but I'm just genuinely so curious. I hope that this has been useful. I mean, useful for the minority of you who are currently in the market for a fertility tracking app. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments if you have had similar experiences or different experiences with these apps, or if you use an entirely different app to any of the ones mentioned here. Let me know in the comments how you find it. And thank you so much for watching and making it to this point, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!